All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at the Canon EOS R, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at the EOS R as a wedding photography tool. Can you use it to shoot weddings? I had the pleasure of using this to shoot a wedding a little while ago, and I want to share my experiences with you. So if you're thinking about buying an EOS R to shoot weddings and events, this video is for you. Stick around, and yeah, let's talk about it after the intro.
The rings, please.
Oh God!
No! Oh my God! Oh my God! All right, so my name is Vasco. Here's my informations if you want to go check me out, and I have more links in the description if you want to check out my work. I am a professional full-time photographer. This is the tool that I use to make my money and pay my bills, and it's been kind of tough now with the whole COVID situation, but it is what it is. We're all dealing with it our own way. So photographer first, full-time photographer. I started my business in 2005, and that's when I shot my first wedding, and I've been shooting weddings ever since. I enjoy them. I think they're a lot of fun. And I used to use a lot of like 5Ds. That was my go-to camera for weddings, was the 5D. And this was so much more fun to shoot a wedding with, I'll tell you that. But before we do that, let me just say, if you're in the Greater Toronto area or in Southern Ontario and you're looking for a wedding photographer, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to promote myself a little bit. Links down below. Check out my website. Contact me to shoot your wedding. I'm available for hire, full-time photographer right here. But with that being said, let's get back to the video. We're going to talk about the EOS R, and we're going to talk about the lenses I used to shoot this wedding. We're going to talk about the ergonomics of the camera. We're going to talk about the memory card situation because it only has the one card slot. We're going to talk about the control ring, low light, and the swipe bar, and then I'm going to give you my overall experience and my conclusions on this camera. So let's get into it. Okay, so my lenses of choice, we have the 85 1.2. Love this lens for shooting weddings, and the 35 1.4. So those are my two go-to lenses when I shoot weddings, and I love shooting them at 1.4 and 1.2 when I have one person or one object as my subject. But if I have two people or more, I'll take it up to f2 to give it that depth of field, just make it a little bit wider so you don't have one person's face in focus and everyone else is blurry. So those are the two main lenses I used, and these were on my camera about 90% of the time when I was shooting this wedding. Well, I'd say 95% of the time. And the other 5% of the time I was using the RF 24 to 105 f4. Now, I don't have the budget for it, but I want to pick up the 28 to 70 f2 because that would be a better wedding photography lens, but this is the one I had, so this is the one I brought. And it's an f4 lens, so it's not the best. I like shooting with natural light, and I like shooting in low light situations, so I have the fast primes. But I did put this lens on my camera when shooting the actual wedding ceremony, and I'll show you those shots now. You can take a look at them, and you can see the depth of field is a little bigger, a little wider than it was with the primes. And the reason I went with the zoom lens during the ceremony is sometimes you want to zoom in on the ring or a hand or an expression, then you want to zoom out and catch a couple, or zoom out and catch a group shot, or zoom out and catch the bride and the groom coming down the aisle with all the people clapping in the background. And so sometimes you want narrow, sometimes you want wide, and I find for the ceremony especially, I like using a zoom lens for that, and then all the other times I'll use prime. So that's the story with that, and those are the lenses that I use. So now let's talk about ergonomics. All right, so the ergonomics of this camera, I have to say, are by far the best that Canon has ever made. This camera is even nicer in the hands than the R5, and I haven't held the R6, but the R6 is similar to the R5, so I can't really say anything, but based on all the cameras I have used from Canon, this is number one. It's like the size of a VHS tape, really, with a little handle, and it fits perfectly in the hand. The R5 has a straight edge here at the bottom that kind of digs into your palm, and this has a little curve, and it just fits in your palm really nice. It's really comfortable to hold, and I know it's comfortable to hold because I shoot strapless, as you can see, and in studio, never have the strap on. I find it gets in the way, but when I shoot weddings and events, I always put the strap on, because when you're not shooting, the camera's hanging on the shoulder, around the neck, whatever. You don't want it in your hands all the time. And I forgot the strap at this wedding, and I got to the wedding, and it was in like the country somewhere. There's no way I could get back to the studio to get the strap, and I was just like, I'm gonna be holding this all day long. And you know what? This camera is comfy to hold. It just hangs in your hand, hangs on one finger, and you can hold it by the lens, and it was so comfortable. Like, my experience with shooting weddings comes from, like, I'm a 5D user, and I was using 5Ds. They're bigger, they're heavier. You know, you got the prism and everything. And after I shot a wedding with the 5D, I was always like, oh my God, my back, I feel broken. This thing is so heavy. And it's just like, oh, I didn't enjoy the experience of working with the 5Ds because of the weight of the 5Ds. It was fine when I was younger, right? And now I'm getting older, and it's just like, I don't want to put this fatigue on my body. So shooting with the EOS R was a dream. Like, no strap. I held it in my hand all day long with this. It's got the 85 1.2, which is a heavy lens, and no issues whatsoever. I felt great by the end of the wedding, and I was like, wow, I can shoot weddings back to back now. So yeah, that was my experience with the Ergonomics. And another little bonus here with the R, and it's on the R5. I assume it's on the R6, but don't quote me on it. I don't have the R6, haven't used it. But if you look in there, the shutter comes down. It comes up when you turn on the camera, but when you turn off the camera, it comes down. And I love that. I love that. That absolutely is the best, most incredible invention or creation or innovation in camera tech, in my opinion, in the last 5 years. So kudos to Canon for that. Like, when you shoot a wedding or an event and you're in like a dusty church or a wedding hall, I'm always hesitant to switch lenses because I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna get dust on the sensor. And that's the worst, man. When you get dust on your sensor and you shoot a wedding and then you're like editing that same dust spot out in 100 images, it's like, it adds so much time to your workflow. But that I've had this camera since it came out. I got it, I pre-ordered it, and I got it, and I have not cleaned the sensor once. Like, there's absolutely no way dust gets in there. It's amazing. I love that. So yeah, kudos to Canon on that. Ergonomics, fantastic. Personally, I would love to see the on-off switch over the shutter release button. I've used Sony's, I've used Nikon's, I've used Lumix cameras, and I just get used to it here, and it makes sense here because it's just, I like one-handed operation. You know, you have a shot, you know, cameras are resting, you know, on the strap or on your neck or in your camera bag. You just pick it up, flip it on, and click, click, click. That process from grabbing the camera to turning it on to shooting is just so fast and so smooth. So I would love to see the on-off switch here in the future. Some people say you accidentally turn off the camera if it's there. I've never accidentally turned off a camera, ever. So yeah, that's the only thing I would love to see Canon do in the future, which I don't think they will. They're pretty stubborn about keeping the on-off switch on that side, but who knows? That's just my opinion. Next, memory cards. All right, so this is a controversial thing. Memory cards. Now, for all the good stuff Canon did with this camera, one memory card, like, I don't know. I don't get it. Canon's made some good moves in the last 5 years, and they made a lot of stupid moves. And in my opinion, this is a really stupid move, because this camera was designed as Canon's first entry into the mirrorless world, full frame, professional-ish camera. I wouldn't say R is professional, but you can definitely get some professional shots with it. But one memory card slot is absolutely unacceptable. No. But that being said, let me talk about how you can sort of mitigate the risk when using your memory cards and shooting things like weddings. Okay, so here's the thing. I've been a photographer for a long time. Opened my business in 2005, but I've been shooting for a lot longer than that. The thing is, I've talked to a lot of photographers and Canon users, and the cards that seem to corrupt in Canon cameras the most are Lexar cards. I don't know if it's Canon and Lexar don't play nice together or what the case may be, but as a professional full-time photographer that shoots with Canon, I never, ever buy Lexar cards and put them in my Canon cameras, because I've heard a lot of stories about Lexars failing. The cards I do use are SanDisk, and I've used Transcend cards. I had CF Transcend cards for my 5Ds, never had any issues. And I think Transcend is owned by Mitsubishi, I think. But anyway, SanDisk is the way to go with Canon. I've never had any issues with SanDisk cards failing or corrupting or had any problems with them, so I do that. And now the second thing I want to mention is memory cards have a read-write cycle. So you can only write on these 100,000 times. I think each slot for memory has 100,000 read-write cycles, something like that, but they don't last indefinitely, right? They have a certain lifespan. So what I do is every 2 to 3 years, I'll mark down my memory cards when I buy them, and then every 2 to 3 years, I'll just sell them. I'll throw them on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, and I'll just sell them at a good price. And you know, as a professional photographer, I use them all the time. So maybe halfway through the read-write cycle, I'll sell them off. I'm guessing like 2-3 years. And then I'll sell them to an amateur photographer, you know, or somebody who's not going to use them that much. Because, you know, amateur photographers, weekend warriors, they shoot once in a while. You know, 50, if I use the card halfway through and there's 50,000 cycles left on it, their cards are gonna last for a long time. But I always mention to them, hey, I'm a professional photographer. I've used this many times, and you know, here's the card at a good price, and you know, buyer beware. And that's it. So always keep your memory cards fresh. You know, every 2 to 3 years, just replace them and get new ones in there. And you shouldn't have any problems shooting with an EOS R with one card slot. And it's good practice, even if you have 2 card slots, to keep your cards fresh anyway. So that's my thoughts on that. Now let's move on to control ring. So this is the control ring. All of Canon's new RF lenses have this programmable ring on the camera, and it's a very nice feature. I think this is definitely a win for Canon. It's a great innovation. If you notice here, there's a lot more connection points for information to flow between the lens and the camera, and that's because of the control ring. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of the control ring. I never really use it, but I love the technology, especially for the future, because if Canon wants to replace the control ring with some buttons, maybe you could have buttons on the camera lens that do certain things. There is the bridge there to communicate with the camera, so it's definitely future-proof, and I like that. Usually I'll have the control ring set to ISO, but I usually turn it off. And here's the thing. If you're using your control ring while shooting events, that's fine, no problem. But if you have the flash on your camera or you're using studio strobes, there's a setting in the menu called exposure simulation. So if you're shooting natural light, you have your exposure simulation on. So that means whatever the camera sees and whatever your settings are, it'll simulate that exposure. So when you're looking through the EVF or on the back screen, you'll see it. So if you change your ISO, make it really high, it'll get super bright, and you'll know just by looking at the screen that, hey, you know, my ISO is wrong, let me change that. But if you're shooting with flash or studio strobe, you have to turn off exposure simulation, and the camera will just run like a generic simulation, because obviously when you shoot a flash, whatever settings you're using on your camera are going to create the wrong exposure here, right? So in that situation, if you accidentally move your control ring, I mean, it's not easy to move, it's pretty like solid, but you can accidentally move it. So I mean, just something to keep in mind. So if you're shooting a wedding and you have your flash on your camera and your exposure simulation is off, just pay attention to, if this is ISO or whatever setting it is, just pay attention to that setting to make sure you haven't accidentally moved it, which is why when I shoot weddings and events, I just turn the control ring off, because I don't want to deal with that. So it's up to you. It's all about personal preference. I don't want to say that's a negative on the camera or the lens. It's definitely a great innovation. It's just something to keep in mind if you have exposure simulation turned off and this affects your exposure. All right, so now let's talk about low light performance. Okay, so low light performance, I think, is where this camera really struggles. Number one, it's got the 5D Mark IV sensor in here, which by today's standards is a pretty old sensor, and its low light performance is great if you go back to the year that the 5D Mark IV was unveiled, but it's now 2021, so the low light performance isn't that great, all things considered. If you look at modern cameras, can you shoot a wedding with it? Yeah. Can you shoot an event with it? Yeah. Is it the best? No. Now, I want to talk about low light performance on a different side of the camera, and that's the EVF. when you're shooting in low light, the camera really struggles to find focus. I mean, even with the latest firmware, if it's dark, if it's a low light situation, it's going to struggle to find the face because there's a lot of contrast, especially if you're shooting somebody who's Hispanic and they have dark skin, or someone who's African American and they have black skin. The camera is really going to struggle to find the eyes and focus on that in low light situation. That's number one. And the other problem is the refresh rates on the EVF and the screen. So when you're shooting super low light, the camera bumps up the ISO or does something, and it just seems like the processor struggles to produce a quality image. So when you're shooting, it's like, I say this is the advantage of an optical viewfinder, is because you're looking through the lens and you're seeing, but with this camera, it's trying to process that image and bump up the ISO and make it clear for you to see, so it's brighter in the EVF than it is in reality. But the frames per second is just, it's slow and it's choppy, and it's like you're moving but you're still seeing what you saw over there, then all of a sudden you see what's over here, and then it's a mess. It's really tough to shoot. So in those situations, if you are using an R to shoot those kinds of events, you sort of have to think your way through the shot and compose it and shoot it, and you're kind of spraying and praying, and hopefully you get the shot. But yeah, you can't be quick and nimble and make adjustments. You just kind of have to zoom out a little bit, make sure everything's in frame, and take the shot and cross your fingers, and hopefully you get it. That is a bad thing for any kind of event shooting. So that's been my that's the one downside to using this camera when shooting events in dark situations. So yeah, there's that. Now, in terms of the face tracking and eye tracking in regular light like this, it is absolutely spot on. It's amazing. If you're still shooting a 5D and you're looking to buy a mirrorless and you upgrade to the EOS R, you are going to be blown away. Blown away. Like when I first got my first mirrorless, which was the Sony a7 III, I was still shooting the old way. You know how we shoot with DSLRs? You have your focus point like in the middle or up and to the right, wherever you set it. You kind of focus on the face and you recompose and shoot. Focus on the face, recompose and shoot. Remember that whole technique, that dance? Focus, recompose, shoot. We're always doing this, right? And with this mirrorless technology, the camera tracks the eye and focuses on the eye, and it's amazing. You just have to worry about your composition, the camera focuses, and it makes your life as a photographer so easy. And the EOS R is good. The R6 and the R5 are better. I can't speak on the R6, I haven't had it, but the R5 is amazing. I assume the R6 is the same. But yeah, wow. And the Sony a7 III, wow, that was really good and really sticky. But as I ended up selling my Sony a7 III, the color science was just weird. Everyone looked like they were jaundiced. Either their skin was too green or too orange, and it drove me bananas. I mean, if you're a new photographer and you're using a Sony, that's fine. You know, your eyes aren't really developed and trained to see the tones and the colors. As somebody who's been in the industry for so long, it's like I can calibrate my monitor without using a Spider Pro. I can just visually look at it and calibrate it. It's just like a musician, you know, you're in the industry for so long, you're playing so many instruments, you hear the tones and you can tune your guitar without using any tools. Same with photography, you know, if you've been there for a long time, you can look at the colors and you can see the difference. And the a7 III just drove me nuts and I had to sell it. I was actually really excited when I bought it. I really love that camera. I think it's really, really nice, but I wasn't happy with the photos and I found myself struggling to edit. And so I was like, goodbye. Wasn't for me, but hopefully the Sony Alpha 1, I want to give it a try. It looks really good. But anyway, I'm going off topic. Let's stick on topic here. Next thing I want to talk about is the swipe bar. The swipe bar on the back, and that's also one of those controversial things. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people like me just get used to it. And here's how I set it up for shooting events. It's got a left tap, a right tap, and then you can swipe back and forth. So I turned off the left tap, I turned off the right tap, and I just left the swipe left and right on. So what it was, when I swipe left, it goes to eye tracking, and when I swipe right, it just goes to the focus point. So let's say I'm shooting an event and, you know, I want to track eyes. I just swipe to the left and I'm tracking eyes, composing, shooting. And let's say the bride and the groom and the best man decides to do a cheers, right? And I'm getting a nice low angle shot and I don't want the focus to be on the eye. I want it to be on the champagne glasses. So the camera's naturally wanting to focus on the eyes. And I'm like, no, that's not the point of the shot. So then I quickly swipe right, set my focus point with the back screen, because you can move your focus point with this to get the shot, and then swipe left, go back to eye tracking. And for shooting events, that's super handy. I really like the touch bar for that, because you just have two options: eye tracking, focus point, eye tracking, focus point. And I really love the touch bar for that. I still prefer the joystick. I think the joystick's better, but if you are using an EOS R, that's one way you can set up the touch bar to make it really handy for you. And that's it. That's the end of my list. So let's talk about my overall experience with the EOS R as a tool for shooting at weddings. I really like it. I like it. The photos that come out of it, the quality, the color science, it's really nice. The camera, it's a little older now, obviously, but it's still fun to use. It's a joy. In fact, when I have a choice between the R5 and the R, and I'm shooting just some like photos for myself, I'm picking up the R because it just feels nicer in the hands. It's I find it a really fun camera to use, to shoot with. And when it comes to like weddings, I can't give it like a thumbs up, yay, buy this camera, it's a fantastic wedding camera. No. It's definitely not. I think it's passable. It can get the job done. It struggles in low light situations, so that's something you're gonna have to be aware of. The control ring is also another thing you'll have to be aware of if you have exposure simulation off. Just pay attention to your settings, make sure you don't accidentally move something around. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a beautiful camera, it's fun to use. It's got some downfalls in low light, the control ring. So just as long as you're aware of the negatives, I think you can definitely use it to shoot weddings. And you know what? You pick up this camera for, what is it, like under $2,000 now, and you shoot 4 or 5 weddings, and then you make enough money to go buy an R6 or an R5. So, you know, if you're getting into wedding photography, maybe it's a good starter camera. Make some money with it. Then you can use it as a backup camera, and then use your R6 or R5 as your main camera, which is what I do when I shoot weddings now. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely make money with it. There's no way of like saying it sucks at weddings. It definitely gets the job done. You can make money with this camera, and as a photographer, that's what it's all about, right? Got to make money with your tools. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Yeah, and with that being said, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the EOS R or have any comments, leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I love interacting with people in the comments, so let's get that conversation going. What do you think of the EOS R? Have you used it to shoot a wedding or an event? What's your experience like? Yeah, let me know. And that's it. Twitter, Instagram, if you want to give me a follow. I also have another Instagram that's specifically for my commercial and wedding photography. I'll link that down below in the description. And that's it. Thank you for watching. And if you like this kind of stuff, we're going to be doing more tutorials on the EOS R and different lenses, the R5. We're going to be looking at other cameras, possibly even getting my hands on an A1. And I'll also do tutorials on Lightroom and Premiere Pro and Photoshop and all that kind of stuff. So if you're into that kind of thing and you want to learn some things, definitely subscribe to the channel, because that's what this channel is all about. Peace out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.